I have mentioned on several occasions that I love long-form gameplay. That means things that you can do having a large overarching effect, whether that be through something like a leveling system or in some particular cases a limited amount of lives, or just naturally things carrying over between levels and all that sort of stuff. However, I want to touch on a game that very much impressed me in the complete opposite direction. So this is a game that uses a lot of very short form mechanics, and this is actually a game that was very highly regarded at the time that it came out, but I kind of feel that there's an element of genius in this game that people, not necessarily going to say didn't notice, but people certainly didn't seem to make a big deal out of, and I think it should have had a bigger deal made about it. And people love the story of this game, and I've got to say that I think the story is good, but of course that's not the thing that I care about the most, and so I am just going to talk about the mechanics, and of course I'm not really going to spoil anything. And so this was introduced to me by my friend Alex because he had it on the Xbox 360 during university, or rather no, he didn't, he had a demo, and I saw him playing this game, which at the time it didn't look like it would be something that would be on an Xbox 360, but there he was playing Braid. And this is a game that people say is like a piece of art, and look, games are art, look at this, ooh. Okay, it looks nice, don't get me wrong, but let's talk about the mechanics here. So basically, the idea is it is a sort of platform game, as you'd expect. A 2D platform game, you move from left to right, and you have to get to the end of each level, and you have collectibles. People like to say it's kind of like a rip-off of Mario, apart from really it's nothing like Mario. It's completely different. It has references to Mario, such as the whole the princess in another castle thing, but it's nothing like Super Mario Brothers at all. This game is primarily a puzzle game, and it's a puzzle game that revolves around the concept of time. And this is a game that I have seen people play, and they have not understood the mechanics. They have gotten through trial and error or just by fluking it, I suppose, but there is so much method to every little thing here. Allow me to explain. When you die, or just in any time really, you can hold the square button, that is if you're going by PlayStation controls here, which is where I did get it, or the X button if you want to talk about Xbox controls, and it will rewind time however far back you want to go throughout that play of the level, that section within the level rather. And so the idea is that you can undo mistakes. Fair enough. But this is something that I think people really took too far to heart, as in, that's really not what the game is about. The first level, which is called level 2, does introduce that to you, the idea that you can rewind in order to undo things, such as, for example, you'll have that jigsaw piece where you have to jump off the cannon that shoots the enemy out, and you have to time it right to jump on the head to get across. That's really to hammer home the point that you can rewind time. But the game isn't about just rewinding time, it's about the interactions of different types of things in regard to how they relate to time. And it might not click straight away, but when you get to the second level, which is level 3, that it's called, you will start finding items that are sparkling in this green colour. And what that means is that for those items, for things that are sparkling green, they will always travel forward at normal speed in relation to how the player experiences time. So, simple example, you jump down a pit, you grab a key. The key is green, you can rewind so that you can rewind yourself back out of the pit, but because the key is green, the key will not go back to where it was, it will go with you because it is in your hand as you are travelling back through time. And so you have these puzzles where you'll have a green key and a normal door, or you'll have a normal key and a green door, and different types of combinations. So for example, if you use a normal key to open a green door, you can then reverse yourself out to grab the key back to you, but because the door is green, it won't close itself as you rewind time. And so it really makes you think about the fundamentals of what would be time travel, I suppose. And I think that by really ingraining this system into the game this way, it really does allow you to get this idea in your head that this game is about maths and physics. Not that you have to go through any deep calculations, but you have to understand the core concepts about these things. You'll will later get levels where actual time is determined by your movement. So moving right will speed up time, will make time move forward, and walking left will make time go backwards. And so there are going to be certain places that you won't be able to go, because if you walk too far to the right, this enemy will jump on your head and hit you. And there's no way to avoid that, because in order to go backwards and waiting doesn't do anything, and if you go forward, you're just making the event happen again. But you will also have these green objects, these green enemies that you have to sort of guide and walk left and right to move obstacles out of the way as time passes. But of course, because they're green, they're not going to be affected by your movement. And then you've got the world with purple things, and the way that purple things work is that purple things have a shadow. Well, in this level, everything has a shadow, but your shadow basically does what happened in the previous timeline, but purple things will always do what's happening in the current timeline. So you might want to make a thing happen so that something can happen to your shadow, so that you can then make something interact with your shadow. You want to make, for example, an enemy that is purple to hit your shadow, which will knock itself and its shadow up, considering that purple things are its own shadow as well as itself, so that you can then use that as a higher platform with your current self, not your shadow, to get to a higher platform. It's so interesting, and even though it's a short game, the ideas behind it really aren't all that simple, and I just think it's so clever, and I really like it. Of course, one thing that I really like about Braid is that I do think that the puzzles do have some depth to them, because I think in a way puzzles in games have sort of dumbed down, and every time you have a puzzle in a game that is something stupid like, ooh, the door opens if you're on the switch, but then when you leave the switch the door closes. Oh, the solution is to grab a block and put it onto the switch so that it's always held down so that you can go through. There are things like that, and if you look at games that I talked about way back earlier on the list, things like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons or Thomas Was Alone, those are nowhere near to the same caliber as something like Braid when it comes to puzzles. And to be able to make a puzzle with such depth, but also one that isn't long form, make it so that it is quite short and self-contained, that's impressive. So here's a game that I would guess that I played towards the end of 2013, although I'm not entirely sure about that off the top of my head. But this is a game that I didn't really know too much about before going into it, and I believe I may have got this in a PS Plus sale, but I got it and I played it, and I was happily surprised with just how much I enjoyed this game. I often find that with action games, and when you have games that focus a lot on action-y combat, I can struggle quite a lot getting to grips with the controls depending on how the game is set up, and I've mentioned this several times before. And despite the fact that this game did have different types of attacks that required different button combinations, it was done in such a way that I felt was rather accessible to me, and it also had the platforming elements that I really liked the precision aspect of, and this game is Guacamelee. So this is basically a Metroidvania. If you don't know what that term means, it's taken from the names of Metroid and Castlevania, and it's basically used to describe a two-dimensional platform game where all of the areas are connected in some way or other, and it's about exploring and getting new abilities and going back to previous areas and utilizing those abilities in order to get access to other areas that you couldn't get to before, and to collect things that you couldn't collect before. So the theming behind this game is that you are Yuan and you are a luchador, although there are alternate costumes and characters that you can play as that will alter your stats and give you extra effects. Some of them DLC, which, you know, DLC for resources are not very good, but even still. But the way that the combat works is that you'll have your basic attacks, but as you progress through the game you will unlock different types of attacks based on the direction that you are holding when you unleash your special attack thing. So for example, you will have the forward special attack, in which you sort of do this dash forward, and then you'll have the uppercut special attack. And the more of these special attacks that you unlock, the more areas become available because these special attacks are linked to different colour keys. Not literal keys, but you know, like a key showing you the colours of how things match together. Basically, your dash attack is red, so there are red blocks which require the dash attack to break through. And you will also have enemies that glow red, which means that they have a red shield and you will need to use that particular attack in order to break that shield. This is kind of like DMC Devil May Cry, and people will say, well, it's far too simple, you just do the thing that they tell you to do, like you just have to match the colours. But that doesn't take away from the level of depth, because you still do have to find the right openings and the right times to unleash these particular attacks. But you also get enemies with white shields, which means you just have to do normal attacks on them to break that shield. And what this game does that I do really like a lot, especially with these Metroidvania style games, or just adventure games in general I suppose, is that when you unlock new powers, it's not a strict jump from not having the power to having the power. There is this element of progression and the set different stages that will allow you to utilize these powers in different ways. So for example, the game exists in two dimensions. There is the light world and the dark world, and this is a sort of common thing amongst quite a few games where you can press a button and you will switch between these two alternate realities. But you don't have that ability to start with. What actually happens is it will change based on story events, and you have to go back and forth based on which realm you are in, which in this case is the realm of the living and the realm of the dead, where everyone is a skeleton. But you do reach a point where you have all of these portals, and jumping through the portal will switch it between worlds, and it's after that that you get the ability to manually switch between these different realms at any point. So your level of strategy and the way that these different puzzles are solved does vary depending on what stage you are through the game. So for example, in the early stages it will be about finding the right portal in order to be able to get to the other realm, whereas later on you will have this jump that you have to make, but you will have to switch between the different realms in between the jump and things like that. And this also applies to things such as climbing up walls or dashing away from walls, and you have to switch between realms as you're dashing away from walls in order to get other walls out of the way and that sort of stuff. And another example is the ability to turn into a chicken, because you hit a point in the game where you are automatically turned into a chicken, and it's after that that you get the ability to switch between human form and chicken form. So it introduces these new mechanics in an interesting way, and it in turn allows the game to become more complicated as you play. And I really like that design choice. You also get these extra challenges, which are like these extra super difficult challenges. So you'll go into these different portals and you'll have to complete an obstacle course, and once you've done all of these, you will basically unlock the ultimate power, and the ultimate power is the ability to fly as a chicken, which may sound silly, but there are certain times in the game where this can come in really useful, and it's an optional one as well, so optional powers to make certain things easier but not mandatory for anything. I think that's really nice. And also another thing, this game has a lot of references in it, which I think is something that isn't as funny as what it once was, because it's one of those things that a lot of pieces of media do nowadays, I suppose. Like for example, you'll be walking along the desert and you'll see this statue thing, which is basically a Final Fantasy cactus, and you'll have a thing which shows Majora's Mask as a luchador's mask, and then you'll have a room where the VVV characters are painted on the wall, that type of stuff. But yeah, it's a very good game, and one that I was very happy to play. So this is going to be a very strange game to talk about, because this is perhaps the highest game on the list where I feel the game is vastly overrated, and I think this game gets a lot more praise than it deserves, despite the fact that I do still rate it so high. So this game I got on my 18th birthday in 2006, and the game was released on the day before my 18th birthday in 2006. So if you know when my birthday is, you can probably already calculate what this game is without me having mentioned it, but I will keep the suspense going a little bit longer regardless. So my friends Josh and Bridge were talking about this game, and this was actually the first time they met, so this was one of their icebreakers, I suppose. And I had got the game for my birthday, but I wasn't really into playing it. I was playing Suikoden 4 at the time, and I heard so much about how great this game supposedly is, and I did then play through this game, and to be honest, I didn't think all that much of it, and it wasn't until around 2015, 2016 where I actually got a re-release of this game and played it again. And it's because of playing that re-release that I rank it a lot higher than what I did. Previously, I would have ranked it well below number 100, but having played it, there's things about it that I feel that I am now more familiar with, and I feel that I can talk about specific elements of the mechanics that I really, really did enjoy. But let's just cut to the chase. I'm talking about Kingdom Hearts 2. So yeah, my first time playing through this game, I wasn't really all that into it, to be completely honest, and it wasn't until I got the HD remix, the 2.5 HD remix, that I really played it seriously, and I did platinum it. I believe I platinumed it after Birth by Sleep, although I remember did playing Birth by Sleep before this and then afterwards going on to it, but I don't remember exactly. But either way, the thing about Kingdom Hearts 2 is that I don't really find the story all that interesting. And when I say the story, I don't mean the actual story as it's told, I mean the gameplay during the progression of the story as you travel between the different worlds. So you have like Beast's Castle, and you got that whole section at the start with Roxas, that giant tutorial thing, and you have the Land of the Dragons, and all of those new worlds in Kingdom Hearts 2, including worlds that were also in the original game as well, the original Kingdom Hearts, that is. But to be honest, just playing through the story, I did not really find all that interesting at all, and in fact, having played the final mix version, I've got to say that the super bosses as well, I hate them. I hate the super bosses. But why do I like this game so much? Well, you see, the thing for me is that with this game, the synthesis system is the absolute saving grace of this game. And farming for materials and going and finding the different gems and crystals in order to add a bit more depth to this synthesis system, I really, really enjoyed it. And also the Cavern of Remembrance that was added to the final mix version as well, I also really like that. The drive forms that you have, that being the extra special moves that you can access that you level up by doing specific things, I wasn't ever really into those things in general, and I'm not really into the general philosophy that Kingdom Hearts 2 has about the quality of combat, that being you have to be very, very reactive and very, very fast, and you have to know different abilities inside out, and honestly, that part of it just was not enjoyable to me. But as a whole, looking at the greater picture, I still did enjoy this game rather significantly, and I know it's really hard for me to describe exactly what I mean, but I will just say that the whole synthesis thing is, to me, by far the strongest element of this game. Basically, with synthesis is you collect materials and you can use those to create items. Items can be as simple as healing items, or it can be equipment, and that equipment includes equipment such as the equipment that increases your luck, which means increases your drop rate, which adds that extra dimension to the farming process, and also permanent stat boosts. But you also get these crystals as well. Well, I say crystals, there's several different tiers of the secondary things that you can put in. So you have shards, gems, stones, crystals, which describe the different tiers, and you also have the serenity category, the bright category, and the energy category, each of them doing a different thing to the thing that you're synthesizing. So for example, one of them will give you a stronger form of the thing that you're synthesizing, and another one will decrease the amount of other normal materials that you need, and it just adds that extra layer, and I really like it, and I really like doing that for the whole stat boosts. The Cavern of Remembrance, which I mentioned before, this is basically a bonus dungeon where you need to have maxed out all of your drive forms in order to get through, and it poses quite a lot of platforming challenges, which I really liked. And when you get to the end, you get access to 13 super bosses, all of which I hate individually, but I like the idea of having this like final trial, and I really did enjoy going through that and finding the right spots to farm the different materials for all these synthesis items. Defeating these super bosses, the data forms of the Organization 13 members, also is another means to farm for stat boosting items. And so I also like that, the way that it gives alternate methods to obtain these different stat boosting items. It's just up to you to determine which of those methods is the best. So I kind of see this as the complete opposite of Birth by Sleep, where Birth by Sleep kind of introduced me to something that I really liked and really got into, and then steadily I started to realise that it wasn't as good in the long run. Kingdom Hearts 2, throughout playing the game, I wasn't feeling it all that much, but it wasn't until I actually got to understand the whole levelling process and the synthesis and all that, where I started to enjoy this game a lot more.